Welcome to Season 2, Episode 3 of the Selective Mutism H.E.L.P. Home Educational Learning Program podcast. My name is Kelly, and I'm a parent of a child who has overcome selective mutism, and I'm a BCBA specializing in supporting kids and teens with SM. This podcast is meant to provide general information about SM, and it's not to diagnose, treat, or be used in lieu of help from an SM specialist. This is part 3 of the 3-part fading in conversation. Part 1 was a discussion of how I did a fade in with a new client in their home to establish verbal communication. Part 2 was transferring speech from myself to a same-aged peer that my client didn't know. And now part 3 is transferring speech within the school. So you may have heard, that fading in is a great way to help a child begin to speak in a school setting. You may also have heard that it can be a very long process and must be taken slowly. So if you go in and try to fade in one person every day, it could be too much, and it may prevent the child from moving forward. You may have the best intentions, but it needs to be a slower process, really checking in and understanding what the client is going through. So when I started doing in-school sessions with this client, it was like a different kid, with me at his home, with him at our home, with my son after he transferred speech. He was a normal, kindergartner. He was making jokes. He was enjoying our conversations. He was participating in conversation. He was playing games. We had a ton of fun, and he was his normal self. Now, when I went to school, that all changed. He was very rigid with his movements. His face was very flush most times. His pupils were big, and no communication. And so what I did for the school, so how we worked it, and the school was phenomenal in allowing me to come in. So I would come in during their lunch break, and all the kiddos would go to lunch, and then my client and I would stay back in the classroom and have our lunch there, and I would work on transferring speech within the school. So we first started with just me in the classroom and him. And even though we've been, working together for a few weeks now and had, speech established right away, he really struggled to use his voice in the classroom. So I recognize that. So even though I had the intentions of having him communicate verbal with me right away as soon as I got there, I could see from his body language that he was in a state of pretty extreme anxiety. So I had to start basically at the beginning again of that communication ladder to establish that rapport and trust, and helping him understand that he is safe with me in the classroom. Again, that nervous system safety. So we just started with, the basic head nods, holding up finger choices. And it was interesting too, because at school, when he did finger choices, they were down on his lap, almost to the point where I couldn't even see them. So I'd be like, what number was that? I couldn't quite see it. And then he would hold it up a little bit higher. Anytime his teacher came into the room, there was, a vast change again in just his demeanor. He would withdraw more and became very anxious. So again, I was taking all that into account. So we ended up doing I think it was 2 weeks of me just being in the classroom with him, for him to start using his voice with me in the classroom. So once we established that, then we started bringing in my son, because again, they had the same lunch period, which was really lucky for this to all kind of fall into place. So my son would come into the classroom during lunch, and again, starting at the bottom, working on nonverbal communication, then like the uhs and uhs and the yes and nos and forced choice, and working our way up into them just being silly guys. Now, one of the strategies that we used to help unlock his voice in the school was we use these little buttons. I have one here. They're actually dog training buttons that they sell at PetSmart, but they're for other purposes as well. But you can record the child's voice. I don't know if this one has it No, this one's not working yet. But you can record the child's voice, and then when they push the button, they can hear their own voice. Now it's not 100% sound like them. It's a little muffled because it's just a tiny little speaker. But it gets the point across that their voice is coming out. So what we did is we played hot or cold. So he really liked Minions. So I had a special little Minion. Can I have it? Yes. A special little Minion um, thing my kids had made, and we hid that around the room. So before we did it in the school, we would do it at my house during our sessions here. So we would hide the little minion guy. We would take our buttons and we press hot or cold in our voices for him to hear that. So as he was comfortable with that, we would then incorporate my kids in it at my home office. And again, making sure that he was able to play that game with success. So then we transferred that into the classroom. So my son and him would play the game using their buttons, hot or cold, and really enjoy. I mean, his, again, body language changed. This time he's jumping around and being much more mobile and looking around and laughing and really enjoying that game. So that was one step that we used to help get his voice out in the classroom without necessarily having his voice out in the classroom. So again, we gradually played these types of games, gradually weaned out the buttons. So instead of using the buttons, we were saying hot or cold, or he'd whisper to me and I would repeat, getting it to a point where he was comfortable using his voice with my son in the classroom. And that took a bit of time, probably 3-4 sessions to get to a point where they were speaking comfortably to each other, just like they were at his home and in my home office. So then we were thinking about either doing a fade in with the teacher, having her involved in those lunch sessions, or a preferred peer. And again, I think it's important to have those conversations with either your child or the client or whomever you're working with to help them decide what's more important to them. And for this kiddo, he wanted a peer to be in with us, which is great. Either one would have worked for me. And again, I let him know there's no wrong choice. There's no wrong person to come in and do these fun games with us. So he picked a friend. We okayed it with parents that he could stay with us in the classroom during lunchtime. Again, it worked out. His parent was a teacher at the school. Like really everything was falling nicely into place. So same thing. We started having these very low speaking or communication expectations when the friend was there. Again, I was constantly monitoring his body language to know how anxious he was. And again, we had to start with those nonverbal communications, just getting him used to being in the classroom with this peer and with my son and with myself. So again, just gradually introducing one new person at a time. And throughout all of this too, I was helping him understand more about fear and what that feels like, why it's happening, trying to educate him also on why this is going on. So we have, and I might do another podcast on this. I've created some characters to help understand more about this. So I have Amy, the amygdala. I have Corey, the prefrontal cortex, and I have Will or Wilma, depending on the kiddo, for the willingness, kind of like a superhero. So I'll maybe next episode I'll share my Amy stories. But again, trying to help him understand that, hey, Amy's probably going to show up in the classroom when your friend is with us in lunch. But we need to enlist Corey's help and we need to enlist Super Will's help to prove to Amy that you can do this. So again, it's important to help educate them as well during this process, I feel. So I was hoping that really it wouldn't take too many sessions for us to transfer speech to his classmate. Unfortunately, that didn't go as planned. But again, it's recognizing that and breaking the steps down to a way for the kiddo to make progress. So some of the strategies that we used, again, we did the hot or cold buttons, loved it. Everybody enjoys hot or cold. But I wanted to get his voice out. So one of the ways we did that was through an ABC game. That's kind of what I call it. Basically, we sat in a circle and we would do the alphabet. We would all take turns with the letter. So I would start with A, my son would go B, the friend would go C, my client would go D, and then I would go E. And we would keep going in a circle until, just to get everybody's voice out. And I like doing this game because number one, most kiddos, these are kindergartners, they all know their alphabet, and this can be done with older kids too. It's very rote. They understand it. It doesn't take much thinking for them to play this game. They can just kind of focus on getting a word out. That's not a really long word. It's a one syllable most times. So as we did this, again, the first multiple times, it was a challenging for my client to say that letter. So I would lean in really close and have him whisper in my ear. And then we, do the round that way. And then I would lean in, but not as close, and have him say it. And then we do the round. And then I wouldn't lean in at all. So now he's trying to project a little bit louder. So again, this took some time. And at one point too, I asked the friend to sit at a different table and to not make eye contact as my client was saying those words again, just to try to remove some of those stressors. When our kiddos are in this freeze or shutdown, eye contact has a different perception to them. And I wanted to make sure that I was helping my client move out of freeze and shutdown by removing that eye contact from the perceived threat, which obviously his little friend is not a threat, but his nervous system was picking it up as it was a threat. So again, we did the ABC game. He did great. We then changed it to numbers. So we would count up to I think 30 to again get the words out. I also brought in a decibel reader so we could see how loud are we using our voice, and we would play some games with how loud can we get our sounds. That was helpful. We would do a word game where I would come up with a word and then they would have to guess a letter. So now we're moving it beyond just the rote understanding the alphabet to now trying to log in some of our cognitive thinking, logical reasoning skills as the anxiety lowers. So once he was comfortable playing the ABC game, then we move beyond to the just pick a letter to try to guess this word. So again, the kiddos would take turns saying a letter. Oftentimes I would have to lean in, but we then moved that to my client saying the letter to my son, and then my son repeating it. So starting to use my son as a bridge. So we did this for a while. Again, he showed improvement, but we then felt like we were getting stuck, and I wanted him to move beyond the whisper. So he was whispering his responses pretty regularly. My client's friend and my son could hear him, but again, we couldn't get beyond that whisper. So I started. First I started with bubbles. So I thought bubbles would be fun because we can practice that deep breath. It has to be very specific on getting that bubble to be blown. But then I remembered I'm with kindergartners and they knock the bubbles over so many times. I couldn't believe it. So I'm like, okay, no more bubbles. But again, it was interesting to see how the bubbles were being blown by my client, especially because it does take a certain breath to blow a bubble. And if you're in a high state of anxiety, it's a lot harder to do that. You can't get that right breath. And so by practicing with his friend and my son, he eventually was getting these bubbles to be blown nice and big. But again, it was a disaster with spilling. So word to the wise out there. So then I brought in kazoos. I was a little hesitant on this because kazoos with kindergartners is very loud, but that's okay. It worked. It was a great transition because if you use a kazoo, for those of you that haven't used a kazoo in a while, you don't just blow air. You have to create sound with your vocal cords. You have to have some vibrating vocal cords to get the sound to go through the kazoo. So again, this was a great way to help my client get a sound out that wasn't his voice. So we did the same ABC game. I brought a kazoo, we all kazooed it up, had a good time in a circle and did the ABC game with the kazoo. We did numbers with the kazoo. We did the word game with the kazoo. We used the kazoo in every speaking game imaginable. We played I Spy with the kazoo. I got really good at speaking kazoo language. But again, my client was excited. His body language was changing. He was wiggling around more in his seat and laughing, and it really was enjoying himself. Wasn't that rigid, stuck kiddo as he started. So again, we had to find a way to move beyond kazoos because we can't communicate in kazoos forever. So then I started incorporating knock knock jokes. Again, I love kindergartners. The little ones are so fun. They're easily amused, and I have the sense of humor of a kindergartner. So knock knock jokes were so fun for all of us. So we started with the kazoos. I would say knock knock. They would all kazoo, who's there? I would say the thing, and they would repeat it in the kazoo, and we all had a good giggle. And then we would do, I would say knock knock, they would say who in the kazoo, and they're outside of the kazoo. So now we're starting to get a word without the kazoo, and all three kiddos were doing this. And then we eventually weaned it out so that we didn't need the kazoo at all. So my client at full volume was saying who's there, orange who, all of those call and response knock knock jokes. I think we did probably 10, 15 of them. And he did them all the time with his little classmates sitting right next to him too. So it was a great to see. And then I offered it to the kids, like, who wants to say a knock knock joke? And the other two boys did their cute little kindergarten knock knock jokes. And then my client raised his hand, like, okay, go ahead. And he said knock knock. I was like, I was so proud of him. So I all said, who's there? Fortunately, he didn't have it ready to go. I think his mind went blank. So he couldn't quite come up with the next word for us to then repeat. But he said knock knock, and it was great. I was so proud of him. So that's where we are now. Again, I was hoping that this transition period, transferring speech from my son in the classroom to his peer in the classroom, would have gone a little bit quicker, but I needed to also follow my client's pace and not push him too hard. And I also wanted to make sure that we were practicing all the things we were doing in the classroom at our in-home office sessions as well. So it did take some time. So we have just a few more weeks left of the school year. And so I had asked him, how hard, so he's a big reader, which again, kindergarten is super fun because once they learn how to read, they just want to read everything. And so he has his favorite type of book. And so I said, how about this? If you're able to use your voice in front of all of your students or all your classmates by the end of the year, I'll get you a copy of your favorite book, like the next one in the series. And he had this big smile on his face and he's like, yes. I'm like, okay. So one other strategy we've been working on throughout the few months as well is surveys, like a this or that survey. So him and I would work on coming up with, do you like Spider-Man or Batman? Do you like strawberries or kiwi? Do you like summer or winter? So we would find pictures of all of these things, and then we would practice asking other kids these questions. So we started with his brother and sister, and then my kiddos, and then his neighbors, and kind of anywhere they were going, he was asking people this or that. He would mark it down, and then we would look at the answers when he come back. So that's been something we've been working on and practicing for a long time. So I said, okay, how about we put together our final this or that survey, and we ask each kiddo one at a time. So in their school, they have this little like waiting area, sitting area, common area, I guess you could call it, just outside their classroom. So our plan is for me to come during like their center time and to call each kiddo out to this little common area for him to ask the this or that question. So we're going to start this week. So maybe next podcast, I'll let you know how it all went. But the plan is, again, for him to come up with the order of kids that he'll ask. So starting with his most preferred and going down to maybe his least preferred, or the easier kiddos that might be for him to ask these questions to, and moving down to the maybe harder kiddos. So having him choose the order, and then practicing, number one, doing the questions, but most importantly for me, to recognize where his anxiety is at. So if he's at a point where I'm not getting anything, can I have him just say one of the words? So I would say, do you like? And he would say winter, or spring, whatever our question is that we're coming up with. So instead of having to ask the entire question, can I at least get him to get a word out? Because that's what I said, just be verbal with each classmate, not, carry on a 5-minute conversation. It's just a word, getting his voice out. So then we'll just have a sheet and we'll cross off all the names. I was already able to cross off his one friend's name because he said knock knock in front of him. And you could just see him light up with that, like knowing that he did it. So that will be our goal for the next few weeks, is to have him communicate to each of his classmates. So again, when it comes to fading in, we don't know how it's going to go until we start. And as a teacher, as a parent, as a clinician, we have to kind of play it day by day, moment by moment, communication by communication. How are they communicating, and to not rush it, to give the appropriate feedback based on the child. This kiddo really likes the sticker charts. Like, that was motivating to him. So we would have our little sticker chart and he would come up with the reward that he would want after filling it up. And that kept him going. We would use the reward chart. So the really, the harder things for him were at the start, more stickers. And then we would wean it down so that as it became easier, he would get fewer stickers. So again, just shifting what that reward system looks like per that kid. Not every kid, is motivated by that, but that's how this one has been. So again, every day is going to be different. One day I walked in with her for lunch and he was super rigid again and very flushed and like not even really responding with head nods to me. And they had a sub. So I said, did you know that you're going to have a sub today? And he like minimally shook his head no. I'm like, oof, that's really hard. Like, that's hard to know, like to come in and expect something and that your teacher isn't there. I'm sorry that, you're going through that today, but I'm glad that we're here now together. So again, kind of validating what he was feeling was helpful in that moment for him. And then through fun and games, he was able to I could see that the anxiety was reducing. So I'm hopeful that in the next few weeks, we'll have him get his voice out to all of his classmates. And then we can, over the summer, work on finding more opportunities to work with other kiddos to help get his voice out. And then start the new school year, hopefully being able to transfer speech right away in the school with his teacher, with peers, and all the things. So I remain hopeful and I know it's possible. Again, I've seen this in my own child. I've experienced being on the other side of this. So although it may, some parents may see things as this is very bleak and overwhelming and, no progress is ever going to be made, I can tell you there is light at the end of the tunnel. It's bright and beautiful on this side. Yes, there are still challenges with any of our kiddos, but the SM isn't something that I have to overthink anymore and worry about for our daughter. So I'm definitely wanting that for all of the kiddos I work with. And one of the things, I've been thinking about with this process is really looking at the time of all of this. So I'm spending, our lunch break is about 25 to 30 minutes, but I always give the kiddos time to eat. So that takes, they're kindergartners, so they're on the slower side with eating. I know my son is nonstop talking, so it takes him a while, but it just takes some time for them to eat. So really, we only had about 15 minutes once a week to work on these strategies. And so thinking about an intensive could help make this process go a little bit quicker. And so that's something that I'm offering now. So if you have a kiddo who, you want somebody to come in if the school might not have a key worker available, or maybe they do, and you need help transferring speech to that key worker, or you want your child to be able to have grandparents come over and cousins come over and have an opportunity to help transitions or transfer speech over to them, or going to restaurants and ordering food, or going to the playground and interacting with other kiddos, and you want something that's a big block of time to help that process, that's what an in-person intensive would look like. So I'm looking at doing an intensive 6 days. So I would spend about 5, 6 hours a day being immersed in your life, going to school with the child, whatever needs you guys have, and then helping transfer speech, helping them understand their SN, helping them understand the fear that's going on, helping them find those first very important steps towards overcoming their SN. So if you're interested in that or have questions about that, hop on over to my website, www.smhelp.org, and I have a little like contact me form. Send me a message through that, or you can find me on Facebook. I have the SM Community of Support Facebook group. I have the SM Help page. You can email me at smhelp2020@gmail.com. Reach out, let's have that conversation and see if maybe an intensive could help your child get that really intensive individual attention and strategies to help them with those first few steps so that you can help them continue to make progress. Thank you all for listening, and I look forward to talking with you for the next episode. Have a great rest of your day.